and welcome to Brief Encounters, a podcast by the DC Bar Association. This series is called Intersections, Energy and Environmental Issues in Law and Tech, a podcast sponsored by the DC Bar and the Women's Bar Association of DC. I'm Cathy Pagano with the Women's Bar Association of DC and the DC Bar's Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources community. Today, our guest is Lorraine Spradley Wilson, founder and strategic advisor at Blue Horizon. In today's Intersections episode, we're excited to hear from Lorraine about her work. This includes how Lorraine started her own company, Blue Horizon, and how it's helping nonprofit organizations, companies, and investors embed sustainability, think about innovation, and chart a more resilient future. We're thrilled that Lorraine can join us today. Lorraine is founder, Blue Horizon, a Washington, D.C.-based advisory firm. She also is a sustainability board member at Novata, a sustainability data management platform for the private markets, following her role as the firm's first chief sustainability officer. Lorraine also serves as a board advisor to ED4S, an edtech company, and as an advisor to New York University's Center for Sustainable Business. Earlier in her career, Lorraine was managing director and head of investor solutions at Just Capital. Lorraine also has held roles in investment management in New York at Bank of America Merrill, Third Avenue Management, and Goldman Sachs. Lorraine is based in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Lorraine.
Thanks, Cathy. Happy to be here.
Lorraine, could you start by telling us all about Blue Horizon and what its primary mission is?
Gladly. At Blue Horizon Economy, our mission is to help organizations ranging from early stage startups to nonprofits achieve sustainable growth. We provide data-driven insights, strategic frameworks, and executive level guidance that enable leaders to make decisions with confidence. Beyond that, we take a holistic and customized approach to advisory by working across strategy, operations, and governance. We identify opportunities for improvement, resilience, and growth. To be more granular, I spend a lot of my time helping founders prioritize their scarce resources, open doors to early customers and partners, work with them on refining storytelling, whether that's a pitch deck for investors or a briefing in person, outlining best practices, everything from reporting to setting policies, say for their workforce. And I think of myself as an accountability partner, refining roadmaps and checking in on KPIs.
That's a powerful concept and effort. Could you also tell us how you started Blue Horizon, how you envisioned this opportunity initially, and how you got started?
Thanks, Cathy. Well, fun fact, which I've never shared in a podcast or interview, I actually studied entrepreneurship at NYU. So it was one of my 3 specializations. And even though I worked at large firms, which you mentioned, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, I was always part of these small entrepreneurial teams. And so I think the concept has been with me for a long time, frankly. I grew the advisory firm really through my network and leveraged my experience in nonprofit leadership, financial services, and most recently, software and data management development. So all of those skills come into play when working on these different engagements.
Well, that's great. And I'm also wondering about some of the challenges to a startup, and a startup in particular that wants to report its overall ESG impact. I'm guessing that these companies don't know where to start and may not understand all the benefits to the company that this reporting brings.
Yes, I agree. I also see many companies falling into the trap of taking on too much. One of my recommendations is to start small with the topics that are most material to your business. A good resource for this, and I know we'll talk about this more, is the International Sustainability Standards Board. Their work is really important and has been leveraged by a lot of different types of organizations.
That's great. And I'm also wondering, how does your continued affiliation with Novata help you understand the wider implications of Blue Horizons' mission?
Yes. Well, Novata is a leader in sustainability, data management, analytics, and benchmarking. As a member of the Sustainability Advisory Board, which I formed several years ago, I feel fortunate to work with other leaders in the field who bring global perspective. Novata was one of the first platforms to recognize the value of nonprofit partnership, and they continue to support that to this day. One of the most relevant partnerships to your audience is the work Novata has been doing with global law firms. Outside legal partners are working with private companies and their investors to develop the right approach to reporting. In my time as Chief Sustainability Officer at Novata, I managed workshops and other value added activities where we brought together outside counsel, private company leadership, and their private equity investors, all to develop the right approach to disclosure backed by technology.
That's great. Could you give us a few examples of some of the successes that Blue Horizons has helped your clients reach?
Absolutely. At Blue Horizon, my work is about helping clients turn sustainability and innovation into measurable impact. I partnered with organizations to develop standardized frameworks that provide comparable, decision useful data for investors. I've also built coalitions of investors and companies around shared priorities to support acceleration in areas like energy and climate. One of the things I enjoy is connecting early stage companies with capital. And this creates collaborations that drive innovation and solutions that wouldn't happen otherwise. And beyond my advisory practice, I designed a sustainable investing wealth management toolkit at ED4S, which equips financial advisors with the tools to integrate sustainability into client portfolios. Together, these efforts give clients not just compliance or reporting tools, but practical ways to innovate, collaborate, and unlock long-term value.
That's great for your clients, for the economy, and the environment. Lorraine, as a woman entrepreneur, are there special challenges or opportunities? And how do you make the best of both?
Well, thanks for the question. I'm often the only woman and person of color in the room. Because of this, I always prioritize giving back and speaking with students and young professionals so that they can see what's possible from a career perspective. I think I've said yes to every speaking opportunity NYU, where I serve as an advisor, and it's my alma mater. I've accepted every speaking opportunity that they have offered over the past 7 years, even if it means a jam-packed schedule or an extra travel day. I did want to share some data-driven insights to highlight the state of women in the workplace. I wrote a piece a few years ago on the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the areas with the most alarming lack of progress versus the SDGs is the gender gap, as captured by SDG 5 for gender equality. According to the United Nations, at the current rate of progress, it's estimated that it will take up to 286 years to close gaps in legal protection and remove discriminatory laws, and 140 years for women to be represented equally in positions of power and leadership in the workplace. Let that sink in.
That's incredible.
Novata, where I served as Chief Sustainability Officer and now as a member of the Sustainability Advisory Board, recently released insights from its 2024 benchmarks, looking at the state of private companies around the world. On the positive side of the ledger, number of women on the board is one of the top most reported metrics across all governance-related metrics. While interest in this metric is high, the actual performance shows a need for improvement. Data on Novata's platform found that on average, only 1 in 6 board members are women, and 1 in 6 C-suite executives are women. There's research that shows that globally, women make up 28% of public company boards and 19% of the C-suite. This puts performance at privately held companies behind that of publicly traded companies.
Thank you so much for sharing that pivotal information. A lot of work still to be done.
Absolutely.
Lorraine, how do you reach out to new clients?
That's a great question. I rely on introductions from existing clients, professional networking, and outright cold calling.
That's a great combination. Could you also share about the many events you participate in and how those help both your career and your clients?
Well, my calendar this fall is focused on New York Climate Week, DC Startup and Tech Week, and several events with the National Association of Corporate Directors. And by the way, all of these organizations have free content that I recommend reviewing. I will also be attending private convenings with the companies and nonprofits that I am advising.
That's great and so much helpful information. From a policy and legal perspective, how do you monitor all of the legal and policy events that affect your clients and help them navigate best practices? Are there any resources you recommend to our audience?
Well, one of the biggest challenges in corporate sustainability is keeping up with the pace of regulatory and policy change. I take a layered approach. First, I follow key standard setting bodies directly, such as the International Sustainability Standards Board, whose disclosure standards are rapidly being adopted by regulators around the world. Their announcements are essential to understanding where global reporting is heading. Second, I leverage trusted educational resources. For example, at ED4Us, the Sustainability Ed Tech, where I serve as a board advisor, we publish free educational content several times a week. Much of it is designed to help practitioners interpret global reporting requirements and translate them into day to day decision making. And third, I rely on peer networks, organizations like USCIF, NACD, and academic centers at places like New York University provide context, best practices, and opportunities for dialogue with fellow practitioners. My advice to companies and advisors is to build a habit of scanning these sources regularly. It not only helps you stay compliant, but also allows you to anticipate where policy is going and make proactive strategic choices.
That's great, Lorraine. Could you also share why it's important for businesses to seek out and prepare sustainability reporting?
Well, reporting is important because it creates a common language for businesses, investors, and regulators. Without it, it's very difficult to compare performance or demonstrate progress. But I always remind clients reporting is just the beginning. The real value comes from what you do with the data, be it identifying risks, spotting opportunities, and engaging stakeholders on next steps. That's where the reporting shifts from being a compliance exercise to being a driver of strategy.
And that's a great approach. Are there any new developments in this area that we should know about?
Yes, there are a few big ones. The International Sustainability Standards Board has quickly gained traction with more than 35 jurisdictions moving to adopt their work. That's a major signal that global alignment towards sustainability reporting is underway. And here in the US, California has taken a leadership role with its own climate and sustainability reporting requirements. And Europe has the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. All of these developments are pointing to one reality that sustainability reporting is no longer optional. It's becoming part of mainstream financial reporting.
Wow. Does this reporting help businesses and organizations thrive?
Well, absolutely, but not on its own. So, reporting gives you the baseline, but thriving comes from acting on the insights. For example, if the data shows energy inefficiency, the next step is to invest in renewables or efficiency measures. If it reveals risks in your supply chain, it's about strengthening resilience. Companies that treat reporting as a strategic tool, not just a disclosure requirement, are the ones that build trust with investors, attract top talent, and unlock long term value.
That's so helpful. Do you have any suggestions about how others who are interested in this sort of career might pursue this interest?
I would say, first and foremost, focus on the role and responsibilities and not the title. So, you don't need sustainability or ESG or corporate responsibility in your title to do the work. Sustainability work often requires cross functional collaboration. I'll share an example from my tenure as Chief Sustainability Officer at Novada. We were pursuing our B Corp certification, and I assembled a team of 15 teammates across the organization to pursue the work needed for the certification. So, drawing on teammates from sales, customer service, marketing, finance, all of those skills were needed in order to respond to the questions at hand and really set the best policies and practices for our company. And for anyone who's not familiar with the B Corp certification, it's a performance-based standard that really shows you what the gold standard is for working within your community, supporting your employees, and setting environmental policies.
Wow. Connecting people is so powerful, isn't it? And if I could back up a little, could you share a little bit more detail about how you created the Sustainability Advisory Board?
Oh, that's a great question, Kathy. Thank you. You know, as a startup, it's really important to have the right leaders in place. And often in the early days, you are really looking for people who can represent you, say at conferences in different venues, as essentially an extension of your team. And so, through a series of introductions and conversations, we really put together such a fantastic group coming from university leadership, corporate leadership, investment organizations. And so the idea was to bring together these different perspectives to strengthen our team and our own capabilities and frankly challenge our thinking. And so it's been a wonderful experience working with this group, this global group with really strong geographic representation to strengthen the product and offering and our stance in the ecosystem.
That was such a creative way to approach it in developing that board. Thank you for sharing. Do you have any general tips for an organization that wants to get started with sustainability reporting but doesn't know how to get to the first step?
It's a good question. And I see organizations, that have just a handful of employees starting out with reporting and thinking about their frameworks. And then I see larger organizations, sort of looking around at their peers and trying to figure out what fits them best. But I'd say having conversations, internal conversations with your staff is important, with your leadership team and with external stakeholders, thinking about the metrics that really fit your organization, the most material metrics. And again, I'd point people to the International Sustainability Standards Board and also GRI to get a sense of the metrics that are appropriate for a company in your industry. And then, we have talked about the regulatory picture. And so taking a look at what you're required to report on. So going from your voluntary and your requirement responsibilities to come up with a set of metrics that are right for your company. And the idea is to collect this data and to have it over time so that you can benchmark your progress on these important areas. So that's my key advice is, if you've got a regulatory burden, work with your legal partners to understand what that is. You might be a smaller organization that's not yet subject to any mandatory disclosure requirements. In that sense, it does make sense to get the buy-in from your leadership team, your key stakeholders, and your employees to come up with the metrics that are appropriate for your organization, the stage that you're in at this time and place.
That's super helpful, Lorraine. I'm also wondering, can companies use this type of reporting to enhance their brand?
Absolutely. I think companies that approach this in an authentic way and that have done these engagement conversations with their stakeholders, with their leadership, that is the right way to approach it from a brand perspective. You often see these headlines where a company is facing pushback from customers, say from coming out in favor of certain practices or policies. I think Target has been in the headlines for months at this point, but coming out and showing themselves as supportive to different policies and then quickly stepping away. The pushback or reaction from customers has been very strong, and they've seen over the course of several months a loss of market share. So I'd say it is helpful to your brand as long as it is authentic to your brand and has the support of key stakeholders and able to stand the test of time. I think greenwashing is a concern that many consumers and investors have, and that's simply a term that means that you are overstating what you're doing as it relates to sustainability practices. And so customers are skeptical and want to see the data, the disclosure, and the actions that support organizations that are doing this work.
That's also very helpful. Looking toward the future, I wonder what future trends should we watch for in this type of reporting and also in the value derived from the additional use of this data.
It's a great question, Kathy. Just a few years ago, we were convincing private companies and their investors that they should report. And wow, have we come a long way. So, they understand the need, the use. These days, I see a lot of investors talking about the benefits, say, if they are ready to sell a company, that they're so happy that they were collecting the data on performance on these different issues, whether it's workplace safety, employee health. So collecting this data and thinking about the next buyer and thinking about how they can show their track record of the improvements they've made to the company, all the way from their initial due diligence on the company to exit. So the story has really changed. The storytelling is certainly important, and case studies. So all of these different ways that investors are highlighting the work that they've done and tracking the changes to these companies over time, understanding that there is benefit to implementing these different practices and focusing on transparency.
That really sounds very foresightful for organizations to do this type of reporting. And that also raises the question, should additional research be done to see if companies who thoughtfully use this data are more resilient and more successful?
Absolutely. And I've had the benefit of working with both large publicly traded companies who have years and years of data and have been reviewed by analysts for some time, make their KPIs publicly available and hold themselves to it. And then working with early stage startups that are more resource constrained, working with venture investors. And so I've seen this big spectrum. And, what we found in my time at Just Capital, working with the large publicly traded companies, is there was a return on investment for setting the right policies, providing these workplace benefits, and making sure that you were taking care of the environmental issues related to your company. So we have the data as it relates to publicly traded companies about how implementing these different policies, there is a reward for doing so. When I talk to earlier stage private companies, I'm really encouraging them to start tracking the data so that they can see how these different policies and processes are paying off. So it's not just about the reporting, it's about taking the data and tracking your progress over time, whether that's looking at bringing down your workforce attrition or employee injuries, or maybe fines from dumping if we're talking about environmental practices.
That is so powerful. So, from a personal side, with all your ongoing projects, I imagine the pace is pretty hectic. How do you handle the work-life balance and try to have time for other interests?
Sure, I've got a lot of interests, and it's every day is a balance. So one day at a time. But I always think of it as the advice I got early in my career was to think of it in terms of debits and credits and your piggy bank and, putting in and making sure that you're investing the time for the issues that are really important to you and the people that are really important to you, and understanding that sometimes you have to step away. So it's a constant balance, but you are able to catch up and spend time. And I always prioritize down to the last minute what is important at this moment in time, and try to think of it that way. So in small segments and in debits and credits, it gets done, and I'm able to prioritize and pursue interests. Yeah.
That is such enlightened advice. Thank you for sharing that. Well, this has been fabulous. We want to thank you so much, Lorraine, for taking the time to share these fascinating developments and your valuable time with us. We want to thank you, the DC Bar, the Women's Bar Association of DC, and our listeners. And we invite you all to watch for our next Intersections podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate it.